mate? You all right?
Yeah, not so bad. Not so bad. Just trying to get my brain back from, oh my goodness. I was reading about cognitive linguistics and conceptual metaphors and metaphor theory.
Right. So light reading.
Yeah, I now don't understand the English language at all, or
That's
any language for that matter.
that's what's expected when you do a degree. Yeah.
Mm.
Then when you go on to do your masters, you will realise that nobody understands anything about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it genuinely is. I mean, conceptual metaphors into and where metaphor theory is going, and it kind of sits on my own research as well. And it's so cognitive. It's probably more cognitive than cognitive linguistics is. That's how cognitive it is. It's it's incredible. But hey, that's how I melted my brain over the bank holiday.
Yeah, I melted mine reading a little bit of yeah.
That's
Wordsworth.
right. You went up to the cottage where Wordsworth's sister wrote all his poems.
No, she wrote Coleridge's poems as well. And I think Thomas de Quincey hung around there at some point too. Yeah. Yeah, it was a lovely trip, and yeah, I was reappraising myself for the lyrical ballads.
Very good. And where is that again? We know because the sponsorship that we do, like Ross Brown's House of Secrets,
Dove Cottage.
Dove Cottage, and where is it?
That's up near Grasmere.
Up near Grasmere. Dove Cottage up near Grasmere.
Yeah.
It is a centre point of literature, isn't it? It's one of those moments, point of history. So well worth a visit. I will be going.
Definitely, yes. Yeah, it's well worth it. Well worth it.
Yes, absolutely. Right then. So, being as we're still on movies, what have we been watching this week?
I'm so glad you asked me. We have been watching this week The House That Dripped Blood.
Ooh.
Really, really thin for my plot of it, but I think that's all I need for this one. A Scotland Yard investigator looks into 4 mysterious cases involving an unoccupied house and its tragic previous tenants. The first one is he hears the story about a novelist who encounters a strangler who's the villain of his books, leading his wife to question his sanity, according to IMDb. 2 men are obsessed with a wax figure of a woman from their past. Then we move on to a story about a little girl with a stern, widowed father who displays an interest in witchcraft. And the final story is when an arrogant horror film actor purchases a black cloak, which gives him a vampire's powers.
Yeah.
Does that work?
That's the film I watched.
What did you think to it?
I loved it. I can't help it. Again, like the previous one, like Dr. Terror, it's kind of like a bit rubbish in places, but this one was a lot stronger as a piece of filmmaking, I thought. But the stories are great. Again, they're just really, really good. I think the stories, don't get me wrong, Dr. Terror is the ultimate thing. So, it puts those things together and it really has a lot of things going for it. But so does this. It is along those lines. It is the true feeling of a sequel. It definitely sits with Dr. Terror. They are of the same cloth, without any doubt. The way that the story is told. I think the way that it uses the mechanism of the Scotland Yard detective is really nice. It gives it a little bit more of a grounding, and so that there's more reality there to then become the uncanny off the back of than with Dr. Terror's. But, brilliant. Loved it. And it still has the oddness. John Pertwee's vampire at the end, he didn't just become a vampire with that cloak. He became a thespian vampire with that cloak. Lots of like that going on. It was great. Brilliant. Loved it.
I didn't think it was as good as the Dr. Terror one. And I thought it had got a lot of weaknesses. I thought the first story was possibly the strongest one, where you've got Denholm Elliott as a writer, and the character that he's creating comes to life and strangles people around him, and then you find out that it's all some plot that's been devised by his wife. And I thought that one had got an awful lot of power, and then I thought they got a little bit weaker as they went on. So
that's interesting.
The Waxworks one, and again, it could be the fact that the special effects were not particularly special, but the Waxworks one, it was just, all right, there's a woman who looks like somebody that this bloke knew and this other bloke knew, and yeah, there was no sense of cohesion to it. But yes, you've got sort of like the gory thing, and oh, there's the head on a plate, and oh, there's a twist, there's another head on the plate. And then we get onto the shitty Christopher Lee one, where it's just he's strict and bossy and gets what every shitty parent deserves if they're being too strict and too bossy. And then the John Pertwee one, right now, I'm not going to criticise John Pertwee because he was my Doctor Who. You know, sort of like said, Doctor Who's growing up and people have. Yeah, he was my Doctor Who when I was growing up, so loved him for that. I also like his son, who was absolutely brilliant in Gotham.
Yeah, Sean Pertwee.
Yeah, and in Dog Soldiers as well.
Dog Soldiers, yeah,
fantastic.
We will be doing Dog Soldiers as one of our movies, definitely.
Oh, good. But with this one, he just seemed to be ridiculously camp in the role. It just seemed outrageously over the top. And yeah, I get what you're saying about the thespian thing, but just a little bit too over the top. The fact that when you see him in his house, he's still dressed up like Doctor fucking Who with the frock coat and the...
But maybe that's John Pertwee. Maybe if you spoke to Sean, you'll find that that's how he actually used to dress for breakfast all the time. They never actually made an outfit for his doctor. He just turned up.
It's a strong possibility, but I thought this one was weaker than the other one. There were, with the first one, with Dr. Terror, I sat through it and loved and ate up every second of it. With this one, I found myself nodding off at some points.
Maybe you're just tired then. Because I tell you right now, first of all, Dr. Terror is better, I think, in terms of the actual individual stories. But in terms of filmmaking, this one was less setty. It felt more grounded in a kind of reality. So the actual filmmaking was better, but the storytelling wasn't. The storytelling in Dr. Terror is great. And I'll use the Christopher Lee one as an example. Christopher Lee in Dr. Terror plays this horrible art dealer or art critic.
Yeah.
And the way the story is told is really, really good. It starts off setting the reality. It then tries to sort of like, it creates bad characters. It creates characters that we want to see a comeuppance for. It then creates an uncanniness in the way that he's not quite sure if he's just seen a hand or not seen a hand. And then it's absolutely obvious that the new reality is, the hand is there and he goes blind. So it covers all those segments absolutely beautifully and doesn't try to work too hard. Doesn't try to put too much in the background. The Christopher Lee one in The House That Dripped Blood. What that does is it's got a really deep story because there's a huge amount of subtle signposting going on that the mother of the daughter is a witch.
Right.
And that's why he was happy to see her go. That's why he was happy to see her die. That's why he's worried about the daughter, because the daughter's going to have the same sort of power. There was huge amounts of that going on, but it's blink and you miss it type stuff. It's there, genuinely there.
Yeah.
But if you miss it, if you miss those little signposts because they're so tiny, then yeah, it's just like, hang on, he's just being a cunt of a dad, really. And then, yeah, great. So she's learned some witchcraft and she's got a way around it. That makes sense in a kind of way, and it's rubbish. But when you watch it again, you'll see he's frightened of her. That's why he's like that. And he's terrified of her from the very beginning because the mother would have been a powerful witch as well. So so it's bad storytelling to the point where if you don't get it, because you should be able to see that. It doesn't need to be telegraphed, but the signposting should have been much stronger in the story.
I do get the impression, and I feel horrible for saying it, but it feels as though Robert Bloch phoned in the scripts rather than putting any real power or passion.
Yeah, I'll agree to a certain degree with that one. It's even the Strangler one. It's like, it's a really nice story. It's ticking along really, really nicely. And then the wife suddenly goes, "Oh no, it was me." And then the actor fella goes, "Oh, actually, no, I'm him now." It just suddenly jumps around the place at the end. It doesn't make much sense. It would have actually been better if it was a paranormal manifestation of his imagination. Because,
but yeah, that's what we've seen with those two stories. We've got sort of like two beat endings. So with the first one, with the Strangler, it could have ended with her sort of like saying, "Haha, thanks for doing that, darling. We scared the shit out of him. He's thinking he's off his head." And it could have ended there. But instead, they had to move it to the next level where he goes, "Oh no, I've really become mentalist." And
yes.
I'm going to... Then we have the two beat ending with the House of Wax one.
Yes.
Peter Cushing's friend goes to the waxworks on his own, and his head ends up on the platter, and it could have ended there, but instead we've got another ending. Haha, and Peter Cushing's head ends up there.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I suppose we've got a two beat ending as well with the John Pertwee one.
Yes, yeah, because you got the beat ending when actually his co-actor is a vampire, and they orchestrated him to get the cloak because they wanted him to be a vampire because they loved his film so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know vampires. I'm not sure they kind of think that way. And then you got the second beat ending, haven't you, where the inspector calls, and yes, goes down and manages to beat off John Pertwee.
Yes, he goes down and beats off John Pertwee.
Yeah. Before being done over by the co-actress. Yeah, that's what I mean. It's actually, it's like the title, "The House That Dripped Blood."
Yeah.
Bloody hell has that got to do with the movie? The first thing my wife said was, "I have no idea why that was called The House That Dripped Blood." At the end of it, we enjoyed it, but that was her first thought, was it has nothing to do with the title.
Yeah, I mean, there's a house in it, there's blood in it, but the house is not dripping blood. Yeah.
No, in fact, the house has very little, very, very little influence on any of the stories, apart from a chubby fella going, "The house, you know." That's it. That's the only influence that house is having. "Oh, it's a strange house, strange things happen." Vampires suddenly exist because it's a house, you know. There were the stories were too disconnected.
I mean, the fact that the estate agent's name is A.J. Stoker,
yes,
is sort of like foregrounding the whole vampire thing that we've got to look forward to.
And the writer actually has a copy of Dracula on his desk when he's writing.
Yeah.
There's lots of intertextuality going on within this. Huge amounts of intertextuality going on. And it's very, very meta. But it does feel like, I mean, a lot of that double jump ending comes from the kind of American horror comics, from those Tales from the Crypt type stuff. They used to do that all the time in those comics.
Do you think that it was intertextuality, though, or just rather than it being intertextuality that grounds something, it seemed to me more like intertextuality is decoration?
I think it's the worst kind of meta, because, as you know, I have really got into meta, and there is the meta that most people sort of like go on in self-reference, a kind of like intertextuality delivered with a sledgehammer. Like you say, it's a bit of decoration, but it's also a little bit of foregrounding, and it's trying. It's so trying to be meta and clever in being there, when actually all it does is go, it's a bit like, "Oh, crikey, we're doing something in the 80s, quick, throw in a Rubik's Cube." It's a bit tired. Even I think in 1971, those kind of things, it's almost like drinking a can of Coke, isn't it? That product placement thing, it becomes too signposted. So they're not signposting subtleties within the stories, but they're massively signposting the outward kind of classic horrorness of it and that side of things.
Yeah, and I mean, Denholm Elliott finds is it complete works of Poe that are in the?
They're just on the thing, yeah. They're just on the shelf, but they start on it and they linger on it.
And the stories have got nothing whatsoever to. There's no Poe-iness to them, because Poe didn't write vampires that I'm aware of. I might have missed a vampire in some of his stuff, but I don't think there was any vampires in there. Poe, I don't think he wrote about witchy kids.
No. No, Witchy Kids is a very. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, as we have been reading, or go back to our earlier ones when we've been reading, the whole original horror stories were not witches. It was all. I mean, yes, Macbeth has witches, but that was more to really, give the king a hard on at the time, I suppose. But you look through it and it's ghosts. It's ghosts, it's killers. The strangling guy, maybe a little bit Poish. And I know there's maybe a bit of Mask of the Red Death about the idea of waxworks. There are kind of overlapping themes with the original, because original waxworks they were dead bodies that were covered in wax. That was the original waxworks. That's why they always have that kind of sinister feel about them, and that was there in this particular story. But again, it's not overt in any kind of way. It really was. I think it was one of those. Oh, he's horror. Put that there. I was really surprised we didn't see a copy of Frankenstein anywhere knocking around. There might have been one on the shelf somewhere.
Yeah, but instead we've got sort of like we've got a film that's the visual representation of Salome, but no mention of a book, say, with John the Baptist title on, or mention of operas of Salome. Which it just
it's as a piece of film, like I say, technically as a piece of filmmaking, using the mechanics, the cameras, the sets, the way that is, it was, I felt better. But in terms of storytelling, characterization, script, not as good.
No, which as I say, disappointing, because when I sat down to watch it this time, and I've watched it in the past and I have enjoyed it. I'm not trying to piss on it at all. It's just comparing it to Dr. Terror. It's nowhere near as good as Dr. Terror.
No, and it is almost the same source material, actually. It is that kind of comics, pre-comics code, American horror comics.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of these seem to come from. I've actually got a book about them somewhere. I've got this book, which is about pre-code comics. And they're all that kind of thing. They are the Tales from the Crypt. They are Twilight Zone. These TV people absolutely went in and harvested these stories. But and that's where those intertextualities feel like comic references, because in a comic frame, as you know, you would put the Dracula on the desk next to the guy writing, but because it's a comic, you would have to have the whole panel, and you would have to, oh, look, he's got a couple of Dracula under there. Where in the film, they're like, we're going to start on the copy of Dracula and then pan away from it.
Yeah.
And that's where it starts becoming a bit annoying at that point. It's like, hang on, what are you doing?
Parts of it felt a little bit laboured. The framework story of a policeman going down there to investigate. Yep, as you say,
like that.
It's an innovative way of tying all these stories together.
Do you know what I didn't like?
Go on.
Right at the end. Have you worked it out yet? No. Well, it's this. I was like, yeah, so it's this with no evidence of that whatsoever. All the way through.
But this is one of the things that you don't like, when the characters turn and make a direct address to the camera.
No, I don't mind breaking the fourth wall if it's done in a particular way, and it's for it's like you. I don't mind anything being done if it's for the purpose of the story. It's either character building, it's either got build character, build setting, add to the scene, or add to the narrative. If it's not doing any of those things at all, and then it doesn't need to be there.
And yeah, it was unnecessary. It didn't need to break that fourth wall at all.
No,
it could have just I don't know. Do you think that they were trying to actually involve the audience more than the audience were already involved.
Yes. I genuinely think that there's part of this movie that was made by people who didn't understand what they were making. I think they had this, either they had a really low opinion of their audience.
Right.
Because actually it's completely unnecessary. The actual estate agent is completely unnecessary. He's a pointless character in this. His whole purpose is to right at the end go, "I told you so." That's his purpose, and it doesn't add anything to the story. Because actually, I was thinking about it, because when he says at the end, "I told them all that they shouldn't do it," it's like, no, you didn't. You know, it doesn't come across as that at all. And so there is no warning. There is no explicit, "I warned you against this and you went and did it anyway." So,
there were no warnings at all in that.
No.
You're absolutely right.
So I think, like I say, I enjoyed it. I enjoy it for what it is, because it's a load of horror stories, isn't it? Can't not enjoy a load of horror stories. And the making of them, I thought was, it was just that little bit better. However, there's a charm in Doctor Terror in that way of making that low budget movie, like when in the Roy Castle one, when they set up the nightclub, and it's so obviously a studio with the colouring and the way that all that stuff. But you know what? There's a charm in that. So I don't mind that. Where this one was a little bit more grounded and real, except the waxworks. I've never been there. Oh, there's a waxworks. It's a really big, almighty building about the size of Riley's that has one room with all the waxworks in it.
Yeah.
And a woman at the end that obviously smells like Gwyneth Paltrow's candles. Because all men just desire her.
Maybe that's the wax that they've used to make her with.
I mean, I was really enjoying that one as well. I love the whole start of it with Camp Peter Cushing deciding that he's all right on his own. He's perfectly fine on his own. It just doesn't really tell the story. So he's there going, "No, I'm fine on my own. I'll be fine. I'll just listen to a record. I'm fine. I'm all right." Gay bachelor walking around the place, all happy and everything. I like antique shops and looking in the window and look, there's a horror thing. And then always a bit of flash photography going on of this black and white woman. And you're like, "Oh, is that someone he used to fancy or something then? Is that why that is?" And then there's a waxworks that looks nothing like the photograph.
Yeah.
It's uncanny.
Yes, it was uncanny, wasn't it? Yeah.
It's like, well, you're bordering a bit of the uncanny there, Peter.
Yeah, it looked absolutely nothing. And I didn't get it. I mean, was it again? And maybe I'm doing Robert Bloch a huge injustice. Maybe he'd written it so that there was a huge backstory to this, and the two had sort of like both been paramours to the lady in black and white photograph, and they'd fallen out, and that's why they were distant. And, all of the. But there was nothing to fucking suggest that, other than me sort of like twiddling my thumbs, thinking, "What the fuck's going on here?"
It takes massive. Once you actually start putting it together, you go, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense," because you've got to do the film is doing none of the heavy lifting.
No, it's not.
And then right at the end, that's what I mean is, so they put all this stuff on where they might be going, "Our audiences are incredibly sophisticated and will be able to work out this story perfectly fine." And then they get to the end of it and go, "Actually, our audiences are incredibly stupid and won't have understood any of this. We better tell them exactly what's going on." It's mixed messages all the way through.
It is. But that said, I sound like I'm pissing on it. I'm not pissing on it. It's good. It's entertaining. It's a great one to sort of like sit and chillax with a couple of beers. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's not pissing on it at all, because that's the point of this podcast, video blog thing, whatever this is.
Conversation.
The point of it is to discuss these things from a creative point of view.
Yeah.
So we've looked at one that's Doctor Terrors, I think Doctor Terrors is a bit like, I don't know, Play School and In the Night Garden for modern kids and all that kind of stuff. It's a thing that can never be tarnished, however modern world goes, because it's just such a lovely memory. And I will lay a pound to a penny that you first saw that on the horror double bill on BBC Two in around about 1978.
Probably before then. Yeah, probably before then.
Yeah, because they weren't on telly very much back then.
No, but my affection for them has been sort of like a lifelong thing. So
yes,
was, yeah, it could very well have been around there, but I have a feeling it was even earlier than that.
Right, because I remember I used to read about these films in books, and when the horror double bill started, I was like, I had to see them, and I had a deal with my mother that if I went to bed immediately after Doctor Who, she would get me up so I could watch the 2 horror films, because it just didn't. There was no other way I could see them. So the video hadn't been invented then. So
it had, but not for pros like us. Yeah,
yeah, big white tapes and stuff. Yeah, so it's but from a creative point of view, if we were going to make an anthology, and I really, really want to do a stage play like one of these, and I know that there's plays like 222 with Andy Nyman,
right,
which are kind of a little bit like this, but they're not quite completely independent stories. That idea of getting that Brecht idea where the characters are on one side of the stage and then one of them wanders off to have their story told.
Yeah,
I think that'd be wonderful. I really do. So, yeah, but good, enjoyable. Watch it definitely. I think there might be a few people that would prefer this one only because more money was definitely thrown at the production from that side of things. But I think in this room, Dr. Terror is still king of the anthologies right now.
Will he be next week?
Now there's one, because ask the question.
Colin, what are we watching next week?
Next week we are watching another horror anthology-styled movie called Asylum from 1972.
With Robert Powell. Jesus Christ, it's Robert Powell.
Yes, so I am looking forward to this one. This one I definitely haven't seen for a long time, and I'm really looking forward to it. So this should be an interesting discussion next week.
Yes, definitely. Yes, really looking forward to it.
Yes, and please leave comments. Watch these movies and let us know that we're wrong. Tell us we're wrong.
Yeah.
And he does.
If you disagree with us, please. We're always happy. Well, not happy, but we're always prepared to be told that we're wrong. And used to being told that we're wrong now I think about it. Yeah.
Quite often, to be honest.
Too regularly.
Brilliant. Well, that was another great discussion there. Thanks, Ash.
Mate. Thank you.
All right. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.